Baseball is finally back after almost 100 days of the MLB CBA negotiations between the MLB and the MLB Players Association. They finally agreed to a deal yesterday. What's up, Locked On Red Sox? Thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen every single day. I am your host, Massachusetts Pirates team insider Jake Ignaszewski. And unfortunately, Lauren was unavailable tonight, but I had the opportunity to have a very special guest on the show. She was actually a former host of this podcast and Gabrielle Starr, but she's currently the founder of Girl at the Game and an editor for FanSided. So Gabrielle and I break down our reactions of baseball being back and what we think the Red Sox will do now that the lockout is over leading up to the season.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So as I mentioned, I'm here with former Red Sox, Locked On Red Sox host, Gabrielle Starr. So Gabrielle, how are you doing today?
Baseball is back, so I'm like Will Ferrell in Anchorman. I'm in the glass case of emotions. Like, I have laughed, cried, chugged coffee, eaten an entire pizza, cried again. I've written about 10,000 words in the last 6 hours. So I'm all over the place. I don't actually think I've processed yet what it the fact, I don't think the gravity of baseball actually being back I haven't stopped and let it actually kind of sink in that in less than a month, well, actually no, because they're opening the season in the Bronx, but in a month, we will be at Fenway Park and there will be baseball. And we're going to get 162 games, and the doubleheaders are not going to be that seven inning crap. And we get baseball. I don't think it's really hitting me. Actually, it's hitting me as I'm saying it, and I'm tearing up. But oh God, it's amazing! It's so great. I'm so happy.
So I was actually at practice with the Pirates, and my friend, he said to me, he's like, "It's over. It's done." And I literally jaw dropped, stopped in my step. I am like, no way. And I don't know about you, but when I first saw the Red Sox tweet with their hype up video, I just had a smile glued to my face and got chills immediately. I can't wait.
I was like, I want to go right now. I was like, I'll just sit in the seat. I'll sit in Ted Williams' red seat until opening day. I'll just hang out. I'll bring a blanket. You have bathrooms. It'll be fine. I'll bring a cooler. I'll have some food. Can I come now? I mean, sometimes I just walk my parents' dog. If I'm at my parents' house, sometimes I just take their dog and I just walk her to Fenway Park and I just
oh, that's awesome.
Kind of just hang, and if I'm in Worcester, I do the same thing. And I just go to Polar Park. Actually, I was at Polar Park on Friday. They screened Fever Pitch for people. They did a movie and it was on the Jumbotron, or the outfield video board. I don't think we call it a Jumbotron in baseball, but I always think of it as a Jumbotron. They screened Fever Pitch for people. It was not expensive. A ton of people came. It was 100 people came. It was too cold to sit in the stands. So they also had it on big screens in the DCU suite level. People were sitting, they had popcorn and chicken tenders and ballpark food. They had the bar was open with the bartenders, and Blue Sox president, Dr. Charles Steinberg, who was also Red Sox EVP under Larry Lucchino, who now owns the Blue Sox for a very long time. He had a cameo in the movie. He's the guy when Drew Barrymore gets her promotion towards the end, and he's and they're toasting with champagne. He's the guy that's speech. So he talked about, being on set for the movie and the making of the movie. But at a certain point, I actually went outside and I was sitting in a seat watching the game in like 20-degree weather. And, you know, all the seats around us are covered in snow and the field is tarped up. And, you know, she's at Fenway hanging over the outfield bleacher seats, like about to go run across the field. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, when am I going to be at a Red Sox game? And I was getting like so sad because 99 days into this now, it was starting to feel like baseball was just never going to come to an agreement. So I'm so happy. I'm so freaking happy.
And we were getting these roller coaster of emotions over like the last 2 weeks. You know, obviously the first 2 series gets canceled, and then, you know, we saw yesterday there was an announcement that, you know, there could potentially be more games canceled, and then, you know, we got another new deadline. And obviously, I saw yourself say it on Twitter, like, another deadline. Are you kidding me right now? But luckily, like, thank God that 162 games will be played in 2022. And, you know, as you mentioned, the Red Sox will be starting off the season in Yankee Stadium against the Yankees, obviously. And so when you first found out like that they were going to be playing the Yankees, what was your reaction?
Well, for starters, I will be there.
Okay.
I have been roped into it by my friends at work who run the FanSided Yankees site, Yanks Go Yard, who, despite them both being diehard Yankees fans, I love them very much. And they were like, we need to go and we can make work content at Yankee Stadium. And I was like, I'll go, but I'm wearing my 2004 ALCS sweatshirt and I'm going to be a massive B word at your ballpark. And maybe I'll find like a wild card t-shirt to wear too. And, you know, like a David Ortiz jersey on top of that. And then I'll just like, you know, borrow Dr. Charles World Series rings, just like wear those. You know, I'm gonna do the whole thing. I'm gonna be that girl. Oh God, I can't believe baseball is like.
I can't believe it either. Maybe
I think
you
I'm
could
in
also.
shock. I think I'm in shock.
Yeah. Maybe you could also get like a Kermit the Frog shirt as well with
I'm
like
gonna
a Yankees
put
hat on.
Kermit on my shoulder.
Yep.
So he's on the ALCS sweatshirt, which is worn underneath you know what? I'll get one of those like frog backpacks that people used to wear in like the early 2000s. Do you know what those are?
I know what you're talking about.
Oh my God. I'll just like get a green one and I'll have that over the David Ortiz jersey, which is over the sweatshirt. It'll be like a whole fit. And then, maybe I'll get like a replica of that Manny poster from the 2004 parade where it's like Jeter is playing golf today. This is better. Like I'm going to do the whole thing. I'll just vlog it or something, put it on TikTok. The range of emotions was a true, like you said, roller coaster. But I think I'm not trying to be a downer, but I think it's important to remember that like all of those emotions, the negative emotions that we were feeling came from a very valid place, unless you were against the players, in which case your feelings are not valid because you're not educated. But like MLB doing like the Lucy Charlie Brown football situation with the proposals and moving the deadlines and like, you know, adding things in at the last minute and like trying to pull one over on the players, like Ross Stripling talking about how, you know, after midnight, the like league would just sneak new things into their proposals. Like all of that was bad. And it was unsavory and it was just bad faith negotiating. And like the fact that we have the desired outcome now doesn't change that the road to getting here was like very, very bad for the sport, very bad for pretty much everyone involved. I mean, we already knew that the owners were like not going to negotiate in good faith because we saw it in 2020 and everyone knew that the 2020 pandemic season negotiations about how many games and health and safety and all these things, everyone said that was a precursor to these CBA negotiations. Like we saw this coming miles away. But I was just talking to someone about this an hour ago and I was like, this was worse than I thought it was going to be. And they were like, yeah, you know, the league didn't have to lock out the players. They wanted to. Yep. They went on the offensive from the beginning and they locked out the players. Then they didn't contact the players for 43 days. That's 43 days of non-baseball time that was just wasted. And everything that they did during this lockout was not intended to do anything but line their pockets and break their own players, which just shows a basic disregard for the fact that their players are the ones that make them the money in the first place. Like it's not a typical business because the players are the product, because there is no baseball without players.
Yep.
So, you know, for them to treat the players like this, it's just problematic on so many levels, but it just reminds us that the state of baseball, like the fact that we have baseball back is amazing on the field, but baseball as like a brand, as like a business is in a very bad place. We have a commissioner who is terrible. We have owners who are greedy and disrespectful to their players. And I'm not naive enough to think that like it's going to magically change or that it could ever be like perfect, but there used to be owners who genuinely took care of their players. And you don't really see that now, clearly, because they locked out their players. You know, and like John Henry gallivanting around London eating ice cream with his wife while MLB players are like begging for baseball is just a really, really bad look. You know, you have these guys that are billionaires and they are trying to scrimp and save and not give players raises. Like players on the whole were making less money than they were making 5 years ago, while the revenues for Major League Baseball are skyrocketing. Like Major League Baseball in 2019 made a record $10.7 billion. And even during the pandemic season, when there were 0 fans allowed in the stands, with the exception of the postseason, they still made something like $2+ billion, which shows you how much money they make even without fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like you wouldn't miss this money.
Exactly.
And throughout the lockout, they're negotiating new revenue deals that they did not disclose to the public, like the Apple deal that came out yesterday, which they very clearly were not announcing, but Apple announced it. It's like, well, that's another TV deal on top of the $100 million that each team got during this lockout while you're trying to convince people that you don't have money to give players a raise at the major league minimum level. You very clearly do. There are like 6 teams that had payrolls lower than the TV money that each of them just got during this lockout. Like, it's public knowledge.
Exactly. That's actually so that was something that you know I was pretty annoyed about as well, is especially the things that they just snuck in the last minute, and then we saw the players sort of compromise and say, okay, yeah, we'll agree to the bases, we'll agree to the pitch clock, and and then we also saw the advertising patches come up out of nowhere, and I'm like, where's this been? You know, the last almost 100 days. Thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen every single day. But before we get into our second segment of this episode, Lauren just wants to take a second to talk to you about Built Bar.
It's the time of the year now where I've pretty much given up on my New Year's resolutions, but not in 2022. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, and that is thanks to Built Bar. And if you have not tried the Built Bar Puffs, you are missing out. It's one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow, so they're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar. They're like a treat that's covered in 100% real chocolate. And all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They're low calorie, they're high protein. And if you go to built.com and scroll on down to their macros chart, you'll be blown away. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. There's mint brownie, there's coconut almond, and my personal favorite, cookies and cream. There's a flavor out there for everyone, and they're constantly coming out with new flavors. If you head on over to built.com right now, use promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
And the one thing that I brought up, especially, this was the only singular thing that I wasn't on the player side with, was the luxury tax. And it was specifically looking at the lower revenue teams. So obviously teams like the Rays, teams like the Royals, the Oakland A's, and it's something where how are you going to say it's okay to raise the CBT by over 20 million when some teams can't even get over 80 to 100 million? That was my only argument. Now, obviously now it's all agreed upon. It's great that the players are getting much more money. It's great that there is more regulations in terms to make sure that those big market teams don't overspend like we saw some teams like the Rangers and like that sort of stuff do it. And we obviously saw what the players are going to try and do to help out those lower revenue teams through the revenue sharing. But it's something where they just got to find a way to fix these issues with these lower revenue teams, because the big thing that we saw with these labor negotiations is making the sport more competitive. And I feel like with those disadvantages of those lower revenue teams, it's hindering that competition.
I mean, I am in favor of a salary floor. I go back and forth on a salary cap, but absolutely in favor of a salary floor, because the thing is that every team could afford to have a $200 million payroll if they wanted to. And there are teams that we just know are choosing not to. The Pirates, the Rays, the Marlins, the A's. Like, yes, there are teams that are richer than others. But a good way to level that playing field too, not saying every team is ever going to be as popular or as wealthy as the Yankees, but you know how you make your team more profitable? By building a competitive on-field product that people actually want to engage with financially. Like, the Rangers went absolutely crazy before the lockout began, but like, they've never won a World Series, right?
Nope.
If this, like, think about how many people now are going to watch the Rangers because of the talent that they just added. And that talent hopefully will lead to them winning a World Series. Same thing with the Padres, the Mariners, who reportedly are interested in Chris Bryant tonight. Like, these are teams that have never won a World Series. And for a while, they weren't spenders either. And now they're spending and they're trying to build. And that's what should be happening. Like, look, we're both Red Sox fans, obviously. I love when the Red Sox are in the postseason. But we've just lived through 4 World Series championships in a span of 15 years. Like,
yep.
If I never saw another Red Sox World Series again in my life, I could not complain. And like, I want to see, like, the Nationals in 2019. I wrote an article about this for Fangraphs at the time. I was like, I'm bandwagoning this team, and it's awesome. This is a team that's doing something they've never done before in their franchise history. This is exciting. This is what the postseason should be about. It's supposed to be about random underdogs. That's why 2004 was so amazing for us. Like, I want that for other teams. I went to a Seattle Mariners game in Seattle for the first time this summer. The ballpark was amazing. The fans are passionate. Like, they deserve that.
Mm-hmm.
Padres fans deserve that. And the game of baseball deserves that, because one of the best ways to grow the game is to not have the same old teams, same old rich overspending teams in the postseason every single year. Like, every single year for the past 5 years, it's like, okay, Dodgers, Astros, Yankees, Red Sox sometimes, like Rays sometimes. Like, boring. It's boring. It is. It's just a different combination of the same 6 teams every single year. And you know what? Aside from those people, like, people are like, oh, I'm sick of this. We saw those people in the World Series last year. Like, I don't want to see this again. Even Aroldis Chapman, like, got screwed in the postseason, like, what, 2 years in a row in pretty much the same exact way. It's like, is this a rerun? It shouldn't be. Every year should be like, every year on opening day, the season should be unwritten for every single team. And the problem with baseball over the last, like, 2 decades, probably more, definitely more, is that, you know, before the season has even begun, which teams are going to matter and which teams aren't. And I'm not saying that every team every year should be like looking like a World Series team, but like, the Orioles season is over before it even starts. And the same thing can be said for, I don't know, the Diamondbacks. Like, there are teams that just aren't going to be relevant from day one. And in a 162 game season, you can't have that, because it means people won't care about those games. They won't care about those teams. Those teams' fan bases won't grow. Like, the product of baseball has to be at least more competitive. I know it's never going to be like 100% competitive. Every team is really good, but like, it can't be like your team is dead on arrival at spring training, and we have that problem now. Like literally, right now, we know we can predict which teams are going to be at the bottom of their division. Like it's not a surprise. And that means, it's like, why would I see this movie? I already know how it ends, basically.
Mm-hmm. Right. And like, that's like, I read something before coming on here, just obviously on The Athletic, it was talking about like what each team needs to try and improve on. And one of the things for like the Orioles is, are they going to start winning this year? And that's why I like that they put some of the anti-tanking things as so much of a priority. But before we move on to some of the post Red Sox plans, what were some things that you really liked that came out of this new CBA?
So, I mean, for starters, I like that we have a new CBA because that means this is over. The minimum salaries, to me, that was huge because more than 50% of major leaguers like 2 years ago were making the minimum or very close to it. And you look at these guys, I know that for normal people like us, like whatever it is now, it's like $700,000, even the $570,000 it was last year. Like, I would love to make $570,000. I would love to make $100,000. But these are people who are playing an elite skill at the highest level. And when you take away the fact that they have to pay taxes in every city their team plays in, it's not like if you're a Red Sox player, you just pay taxes to Massachusetts. You pay taxes every city the Red Sox go to. Agent fees, all of the taxes. That $570,000 shrinks down really, really fast. And like with the revenues, the minimum salary increase was a very long time coming. I'm really glad that the players fought for that, especially because the guys that were fighting for it, like Max Scherzer, like he makes $40 million a year. Like he didn't need to be out fighting for that, but he was. And he's a physically terrifying person. So I'm really glad it was him because like he just looks at you, and I'm just hoping that like all the players, all the league officials just like melted like the end of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. I actually have the list here in front of me. So they have the $50 million bonus pool that will reward players who haven't reached salary arbitration, but like, make great achievements like Rookie of the Year voting. There's also like this thing about service time, players who finish, I think, first or second in their league in Rookie of the Year voting, they get a full year of service time. Things to combat service time manipulation, which of course is yet another example of the league side, owner side greed. Things, the deterring of the tanking, obviously huge, super important. Benefits for former players, things like that, and better benefits for players and their families in terms of medical, like, medical and pensions and all these kinds of things. Also the draft picks incentives for the teams that actually promote their top prospects and don't manipulate their service time. Like, so clutch. I mean, look at Tanner Houck.
Mm-hmm.
Remember last year when it was like he pitched, like he started a game and then he got sent back and then he came back like a day later, and I was like, seriously? He's starting 2 weeks in a row. The entire team has COVID and you send him back to Worcester and then brought him to Canada? Are you kidding me? So stuff like that. I will give the league credit. They did make concessions. I will also give the fans credit because public bullying on Twitter worked. Like, I'm serious though. This is the first work stoppage since 1994, 1995. So this is the first work stoppage in the social media era of humanity. Sure. And I really think that made a difference because for the first time, players had a place where they firsthand could go and say exactly what was going on. No middleman, no messenger, no way to twist it. Like Max Scherzer tweeting, I was in Florida. They did not do this. Mm-hmm. Like in the 90s, I was one, so I don't really know. But even if a player spoke to a reporter during the strike, they weren't the ones reporting it. from like this is coming straight from the horse's mouth. And the fact that players were so vocal on social media of like, this is what the league is doing. This is dishonest. They never did this. They never said this. They said this and then they did this. Public opinion was in the players' favor. And I think that obviously a bunch of billionaires sitting on their yachts, it was never going to like 100% fix things. But I definitely think it made a difference because the league could not control public opinion. And they couldn't paint the players. I mean, yes, there were a few morons that were siding with the owners, which like, okay, you're probably Rob Manfred on a burner account. But the overwhelming majority of both fans and media were siding with the players. And I think it made a difference. And I think that's why we have a deal today, Thursday, because if it got to 100 days and then it got pushed to, which, I mean, all those deadlines were very fake, but Jackie Robinson Day for Boston, Patriots Day, like once you start getting into it, it's like really bad. And I'm just going to say, like, you know, I think all of our excessive angry tweeting helped.
That's actually a really good point. I actually didn't think about that at all. And I think that definitely did make a difference, especially with the players really voicing out their opinions. Obviously, we saw Noah Syndergaard
Trout, Mike Trout.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, he's usually very silent. Yep. Strawman as well. And it's going to be really interesting now that sort of like the floodgates have opened in terms of free agency and trades. I hope that you have been enjoying my conversation so far with Gabrielle, but I just want to take a second to talk about BetOnline. It's that time of year again as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. For all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting in your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now let's get back to my conversation with Gabrielle. I mean, right before we came on, you know, I read a report from Bleacher Report that it's in a frenzy right now. And I'm really interested to see who is going to be the first person that the Red Sox sign. Obviously, they need what Chaim Bloom said before the lockout ended. They need a right-handed bat. They want to add some relievers. It'll be interesting to see if they do anything with the pitching staff as well as second base. But who do you think that they'll sign first?
You know, I want to hope it's like Schwarber. I feel like Seiya Suzuki is more realistic. Just because I don't think he has as many suitors. I know the Phillies were actually really close to a deal with Schwarber before the lockout and they couldn't come to an agreement on it. And the CBA was actually like, or the CBT, sorry, the luxury tax was one of the main reasons why they didn't sign him was because under the previous CBT, the average annual value of a player's contract counts. And now these numbers are higher, so it's a little bit of a different. The Phillies have a lot more flexibility than they did before. But before, they had about $30 million in space under their luxury tax threshold. And that's a team that has never exceeded the threshold before in franchise history. They totally could, but they don't. And they really wanted Schwarber, but they literally have no outfielders. Like if you look at their depth chart right now on MLB.com, it's Bryce Harper, this rookie named Matt Vierling, and literally no one else because they got rid of McCutchen, Odubel Herrera, like a bunch of lower level, like kind of minor / major league players. Like they have no outfield. So if they sign Schwarber to the deal that he wanted, which is 3 years, like $60 million, even if they spaced it out, you know, $5 million a year for however many years, it would have been $20 million towards the luxury tax for the next 3 years. And based on how much they needed and their hesitance to go over the threshold, I think that that's why they waited. Problem, of course, now is that with the universal DH, they're going to have more competition now than they did before to sign Schwarber. And also, if they sign him, that's a huge amount of money. I mean, yes, the threshold is higher now. They have more space if they don't want to go over it. But is he going to be their DH or is he going to be an outfielder? and if he isn't their outfielder, because now they need to fill the DH role and they still basically need 2 everyday outfielders. And then they also have several infielders who are not very good defenders, like Didi Gregorius, Alec Baum, Rhys Hoskins. So it's like, are they the DH? That team's a disaster. But the point being, I really don't know if the Red Sox bring Schwarber back. I would love to see him back, but I don't know how he fits in. I think that if JD had opted out, this would have been settled months ago, because I think that if JD had opted out, they would have just given that money to Kyle Schwarber, because he's a natural DH who can also play the outfield, which is exactly what JD does, even though he really shouldn't play the outfield, but that he likes to play the outfield. But basically saying like Schwarber was a younger natural fit to succeed JD. And then JD opted in, and I think they were kind of like, oh, okay, great. See you next year. What are we going to do? Like, and they have like 6 outfielders because they have Jackie Bradley Jr., Jarren Duran, like who knows what's going to happen there. I also think we could see Bobby Dahlbeck get traded, because you don't need Bobby Dahlbeck, Rafael Devers, and Tristan Casas.
Very true.
And what I was told by someone at the Woo Sox was, well, if it's between Dahlbeck and Casas, you keep Casas.
Oh yeah.
Which is duh, but you can get a lot for Dahlbeck.
Yeah, I see. We actually had the director of scouting from Sox Prospects on a few days ago, and he said that he thinks that Dahlbeck is more of a role player. And I think with how Casas, how little Casas spent time in AAA last year, I think we could probably see him in July or something like that. But
he's not starting the season with the Sox. Right. But he's coming fast. He's coming before the All-Star break, especially now that the season is 9-inning doubleheaders and fewer days off. He's coming. And I think the natural progression is like, think about it, like Michael Chavis was the top prospect, then Dahlbeck was the top prospect, now it's Casas. All of them basically playing like the same role and really like huge power hitters. But I think it's like a natural progression of like talent of like, okay, Chavis was like fine. He occasionally hit bombs. He struck out a ton. Then it was Dahlbeck. Hits bombs, still strikes out a ton. Like his first half of the season was horrific.
Yep.
Casas is like the culmination of that like ascension of like, in terms of just like the elite level, Casas is going to be absurd. The other thing to consider is that I think this is the year that they start really talking extensions with Rafael Devers, which they absolutely should, because he's Rafael Devers and he destroys Garrett Cole and it's amazing to watch. But that's going to cost money. And, it's not like the Red Sox don't already have, I think they have like the 5th or 6th or 7th highest payroll. Which, the CBT is higher now, so it's still not that high. I think it's like I think they're at like $160 million right now or something, which is, honestly, for them, that's low. But they have a sizable payroll and they have a bunch of contracts that are still on the books. They have Sale and Evaldi, and, they're going to have to figure out their catcher situation. They picked up Christian Vasquez's option, but like, I don't know if I necessarily see them bringing him back after this year. So you have to figure out your catchers, you have to figure out your outfield, you have to figure out second base. You need to square up your starting rotation. Like, is Tanner Houck one of your starters? Is Garrett Whitlock one of your starters? Are they guys who do everything? Like, that's not super great in terms of just
the where does Walker and Rich Hill go?
Yeah, actually, Rich Hill's niece is one of my best friends. So shout out Tina Hill. I'm so freaking excited. Like, we used to watch her uncle pitch in LA when we both lived in LA. And now we're going to be watching him pitch in hometown hero, Rich Hill from Milton, Massachusetts. Michael Wacha, to me, that is such a hilarious signing, just because I remember in 2013 with the World Series.
Yep.
Everyone's like, oh, St. Louis Cardinals wonderkind Michael Wacha. And it's just like such a turntables. Also Joe Kelly. It's just like everything in baseball just comes back around. And I find it so funny. I don't really know what to expect. I feel like Waka is, I'm not going to say he's like a Garrett Richards signing because that feels really mean to Michael Waka. And like, look, obviously Michael Waka in like the early years of his career was like very highly touted and like very impressive. In his rookie season, he was really good, even though he only pitched like 15, 16 games in 2013. But Michael Waka over the last like 3 years, like, yeah, he's played a lot of games, but his ERA has been really high.
Yep.
And I just looked it up, 5.11 ERA over 66 games, including 54 starts between 2019 and last year, with the Cardinals, Mets, and Rays. I have to trust Chaim Bloom because like he literally built an ALCS team in a year with a bunch of randos. Like no one expected that. Actually, though, I will say when I was hosting this podcast, we did opening day predictions like right before. And my prediction was that the Red Sox would be really fun to watch, better than expected, and that they would at least go to the wild card game. So I believed. But at the same time, I'm like, what are you seeing that no one else is seeing? Right. And also because he has been wrong in the past. Like, there was the whole thing with the Brock Holt and who was it that they replaced Brock Holt with?
Jose Peraza.
Thank you. So a friend of mine, I remember he told me he asked Chaim Bloom, like a media member friend of mine asked Chaim Bloom at the time. He's like, so why Jose Peraza instead of Brock Holt? And Chaim Bloom tried to give him some kind of like workaround answer of like, oh, we see a lot of upside. He loves the word upside, a lot of upside, in his stats and blah, blah, blah. His stats were like very similar to Brock Holt's. The difference was he was younger and more controllable than Brock Holt. And that is why we lost Brock Holt and had Jose Peraza. And by the end of the 2020 season, which was 60 games, Jose Peraza wasn't even on the roster anymore. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying like, obviously, I think Chaim Bloom is really good at what he does. But I also think that sometimes Chaim Bloom forgets that he's no longer with the Rays because he still acts like I know that he was partially hired to run this team like the Rays, but you have to find that balance of spending like the Red Sox. I'm not saying spend like Dombrowski. I'm just saying spend like you are the Red Sox, not the Rays. Like be smart like the Rays, but spend like the Red Sox. And that is the perfect marriage because you'll have the giant farm system, which like the farm system rankings super improved. What are we, 9th, 11th?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
From like 20 something, yep. He's doing all of that. The piece that he's missing, which we could very well see this weekend, like dude's going to be working on the Sabbath for sure. We could very well this weekend see him make a big signing or, Rafael Devers, 10 years, $700 million. But I'm waiting to see that because we haven't seen that yet. Like, I don't think he's given out a contract of more than a year since he got here.
It's Kike Hernandez, 2 years, 14 million.
Right. Kike was the exception. He was the first more than 1 year deal that Chaim Bloom has given out. And that's very Rays of him, and the Rays, they signed Blake Snell to that 5-year, $50 million deal. And then like a year later, they traded him.
Yep.
You can't do that here. It doesn't work. You already trading Mookie was already such a bad first impression to like start off your time here. Like now you got to pay some people, you got to pay Xander, you got to pay Devers, you got to like fix Chris Sale's elbow. Like, especially after what Red Sox fans have been through, what baseball fans have been through in the last 2 years with this shortened season, Mookie thing, the Cora thing, now this lockout, like there need to be gestures of goodwill towards fans. And that starts with like shoring some stuff up. Like I just saw the Rangers and the Royals, their minor league teams are going to start their spring game schedule tomorrow, Friday. So today for this podcast. And there's a game at the stadium that is free of charge to fans.
Wow.
And Jack Leiter is the pitcher for the Rangers too. So exciting because top pitching prospect. But like you got to do those things for the fans now, to like circle back to what we started talking about with the lockout, the end result is that we get baseball back, but how we got here was like a really, really, like the whole journey, bad taste in the mouth. Like it was so depleting and deflating watching how this played out over the last 3 months. And like, that doesn't just go away because of baseball, because all of that is still there. The players and the owners are not going to now just like kiss and make up. The players are going to report, but they're not going to forget why they're late and like what the league tried to do to them, just from the basic fact that they locked them out and didn't call them for 43 days. Like if a girl or a guy did that in a relationship, like the other person would not just like forget,
Yep.
So yeah.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the Red Sox do fill those holes. I'm hoping and praying that the big move that you mentioned is either a Rafael Devers extension or potentially a Trevor Story, Chris Bryant, Nicholas Castellanos type of signing. Obviously, like as you mentioned, I want Heim to be smart with the money. Unlike obviously the former president of baseball operations, Dave Dombrowski, I know you have a lot of fun covering him over there with the Phillies, but I cannot stand Dave Dombrowski. But as you mentioned, in Heim we trust, so that's all we can really hope for going into this free agency. But I really appreciate you taking the time tonight, Gabrielle, to not only give your thoughts about the CBA and lockout being over, but also what you think the Red Sox are going to be doing. So for anybody who wants to go and check out your stuff and support you, where can they find you?
Well, thank you for having me. It was really nice to be on the other side of this. And you guys are doing such a great job with the pod. It makes me really happy to know it's in good hands. You guys can find me on Twitter. I'm at GFSTIRR1. If you're listening to this, you either already follow me, you've muted me, or you've blocked me, which is fair. And then I write for FanSided. I'm an editor there, so I'm on their main fansided.com page, and then I also run their Philly site and their Padres site, and then I'm on TikTok, Instagram, all that stuff, girlatthegame.com, Girl at the Game everywhere else. And yeah, go Red Sox. This is crazy. We have baseball. Let's win a World Series.
Exactly. Let's
Chris
win
Sale,
a
Cy
World
Young,
Series.
book it. This is the year. Or at the very least, Chris Sale, sub-4 ERA. This is the year.
And Rafael Devers with the MVP. Hopefully.
Yes, finally.
Cross our fingers. Knock on wood.
Or at least he gets the respect he deserves, because no one talks about him.
Very, very true. But yeah, everybody go and support Gabrielle. She does amazing stuff, and especially her writing. She puts all of her personality that you heard on this podcast into her writing, and it's a lot of fun to read. So definitely go and check her out. But really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you did enjoy Gabrielle and I's conversation. And now that baseball is back, get ready for tons of fun, energy-filled episodes from Lauren and I reacting to all these big moves that we're hoping that the Red Sox make. And we next week have tons of guests planned to really break down all these moves that the Red Sox will hopefully make now that free agency in the trade market is open. But we greatly appreciate you making Locked On Red Sox your first listen every single day, and now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It's free and available on all platforms where you can find podcasts. And also make sure to go over and follow Locked On Red Sox on Twitter, because now that the lockout's over, we're going to be a lot more active posting Red Sox content every single day, as well as follow myself on Twitter. It's at Jake Iggy, and also my co-host Lauren. It's la, 3 laws, Lauren with 4 R's. I hope you are excited as I am that now baseball is back, baby, and there's going to be a lot more Red Sox content coming from this podcast Monday through Friday. So I hope everybody has a great and relaxing weekend. We'll talk to you guys and see you guys on Monday.